The new Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook Wild Game Recipes for the Grill, Smoker, Campfire, and Camp Stove is out on April 24th and is available for pre-order now. Here is your book for everything that's best cooked or eaten outside. From grilling to open fire cooking to Dutch ovens to smokers to barbecue to backpacking meals to how to pull off the perfect fish fry, with pit stops along the way for lessons about Ice Age cooking methods and the best 5 ways to construct a cooking fire you can be proud of. And of course, we're focusing on wild game and fish here with over 100 recipes, including stuffed venison burgers 3 ways, wild duck with ahi verde sauce, a jerky made with cola, a gin and tonic made with fire-charred lemons, and grilled frog legs made with a sticky sweet sauce. This ain't your normal cookbook, so be prepared to be surprised. Pre-order your copy now. For more info, visit themeateater.com.
Hey, this is Tyler Jones, and you're listening to The Element Podcast. What's happening, Alma Woods people? We are coming to you from a very warm Texas driveway right now, and we're looking back on some very cold hunts this podcast. It's all Kansas today. It's all just a complete season wrap-up. We are basically looking at how we're going to approach Kansas next year based off of what we learned this year. So this is the Selfish podcast we talked about earlier, I guess in the week or a week ago, where we kind of line everything out that will help us next preseason. We'll go back and listen to this and we'll go, okay, these are the things we were thinking. But anyway, KC, what's been going on first?
Lots of Christmasing, like everybody. And then I'm also a little bit sick, so sorry if I sound a little bit crusty, guys. It's just a way of life. I think really Christmas does this to a lot of people. You see a bunch of people that you haven't seen in a while, and you get exposed to new germs, and here we are. But here we are. I'm ready to talk about this stuff because I got a lot on my chest.
Yeah.
Like
not just congestion.
And yeah, but I think that hopefully this little discussion will be beneficial to everyone because we're going to be very general with it, and it's going to be concepts of deer hunting, which you can apply no matter if you're hunting pine forest or you're hunting, the plains of North Dakota.
That's right. Yeah,
you know what I mean? So
for sure.
Yeah, it's going to kind of relate to everyone. Hopefully.
Yeah. So we've got some lingo. Some of you will get a kick out of this. Some of you will be mad about it probably. But we've got some lingo that we've created just to help us disguise our properties just for the sake of we put in a lot of work on this stuff. And we don't want too much creeping action going on, but we want to be helpful. So we wanted to, instead of just being these like really secretive guys that at some point in this podcast you're going to go, oh, I don't even know what they're talking about right now. We wanted to keep you in the loop. So we've got a bunch of lingo. We'll go through that here in a little bit and kind of show you what each property is, what the name is, and how that property sets up. We'll try to continue to keep you in the loop throughout. But first, we have a wrap-up from our very last trip in Kansas, which was just before Christmas, right? I can't even keep up with this.
I came home on, the 20th, I think, is
something
when I
like
came
that.
home.
Yeah. And I came home a day or a couple days before. My hunt was fairly uneventful, I guess you'd say. I did feel like I was in the chips, I guess, twice on the hunt. An evening and a morning. I actually ended up chasing a very big 8-point, one of the bigger ones I've seen, which looking back at our trail camera pictures from that, just to fill you in, Casey, remember the other big 8 from that property that showed up just a few times?
Friendly property?
Yes.
Maybe.
There's another big 8. I'll have to show you a picture of him, but I'm pretty sure it was that.
When did you see him? Whenever you were hunting.
Yeah, the CRP.
Yeah, CRP.
So, anyway, that's just a little inside info for you. But anyway, my hunt was pretty uneventful, and it'll be releasing hopefully soon. I'm having making a lot more progress on our videos right now. Just as it's hot, it's Christmas time. I've got time to edit. So
Yeah, we're not running up and down the highways as much right
that's right. So I've been actually our first series from like the heart of the rut in Kansas has released fully. So if you're subscribed, you're probably kind of keeping up with this. But if you're not, make sure and subscribe to YouTube because this is, I don't know, I feel like it's an interesting format. Like guys that I tune into, I like to subscribe so that I can see and keep up with their season, not just see like, oh, this cool hunt that happened, you know. And that's what we've kind of done is block these things into a couple of hunts where some things happen that are cool, and you get to see it, you know. So
yeah, not to mention that the last two have featured some pretty much. I mean, I don't know how to me, it's what you call a world-class whitetail. It's like a very rare critter. Yeah, world-class for the regular guy.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah,
Can we say that?
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
The last two videos have had deer like that. They're like
some good
freaking
ones.
giants.
I know. It's like, and just good action overall, like tons of stuff going on. We were split up, so we were both seeing like top-notch rut action from the best time of the year. So anyway, I didn't have a crazy cool hunt, but you had some things kind of develop later in the hunt. Man, it was fun to be up there. First of all, I'll just say this. It was fun for all the four of us to be up there, you, me, my dad, and Drew.
Yeah.
And just, man, we had some good memories from that trip. I know, you know, things kind of took a turn or whatever, but I just wanted to say that.
Not with the dudes.
Yeah. No.
So we're all still buddies. But yeah, things got crazy, and we actually didn't get to spend near as much time together later in the season. You know, anybody at camp, so everybody's just in and out trying to hunt when they can. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it was fun, man. That was a good time. And
there's actually 3 deer shot on that trip.
What?
There's actually 3 deer shot on the last trip.
Yeah.
A lot of action.
Yeah. So you're talking about not the video series we just wrapped up.
No,
sorry.
No. What we're talking about right now, like the trip that we were on, my dad shot, Drew shot,
late December trip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So kind of a crazy, like you said, in and out, lots of stuff going on.
Yeah, for sure. I forgot we were on that. I thought we were on the early rut hunt, but it's just my sick brain happening over here. But yeah, so I guess a quick wrap up. You got up there before I did with your dad, right?
Yeah.
And what was going on?
It was cold and dead.
Yeah.
I went to a sizable property that you and I secured earlier in the season and hunted a couple days, and there was some pretty good action on the camera, but it was pretty much all at night.
Yeah.
And I put a couple bags of corn out, I think. Got the camera running again because it had been freezing cold. It killed the batteries. And sat a couple sits and didn't see like anything hardly. And so I bailed and did some other things, just trying to make stuff happen late in the season. Needless to say, I went over in Kansas this year for about the second time in the last like dozen years. I've been able to kill like every year up there almost.
Yeah.
So it was kind of sad, but
glad you got shot though. You know, not that it was like a it was a tough deal. It wasn't like a you missed a gimme kind of thing, but you know, like at least you got to have an encounter with a buck and
I feel
shoot
like I was in the money. Yeah,
exactly.
For sure. I had some. I mean, there was some close calls for sure.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, my trip was not cool.
Yeah,
really.
Well, you spent some time with your dad.
Yeah, no, that was good.
Doing a particular activity. You said three deer were shot.
Yeah, we searched for a deer of his, and this is kind of another part of the sourness of the trip. You know, overall, as far as like the camp vibe and everything was awesome. Like I love being in camp with y'all, man. We eat a lot of chips and some salsa and just good food, man.
Some salsa.
So it's always a good time. But yeah, my dad ended up shooting a deer. My dad, he likes things to be in order and done the right way, and so he ends up he hasn't hunted a different stand on the property that he hunts up there in years, probably. I mean, if ever. I can't think of a time when he's ever hunted another stand. And his stand was pretty much dead, other than he's got a real big 9-point that he thinks is only 3 years old. And so he's like, I'm not going to shoot that this year, you know. I mean, we'll be on it next year. So he was just getting tired of seeing the same like 4 deer, you know. Mm-hmm. And he went to hunt a different stand and had like an older 8-point come in that he had seen on camera and had decided he was probably going to shoot. He had passed him earlier in the year just to make sure, nothing giant showed up in the rut. And ended up shooting. And my dad, he has, crushed some deer, man. He's watched way more deer fall, and he hunts a pretty thick area than he has seen deer run off. You know what I mean? The dude, just something about it. When it's time to shoot an animal, he gets it done, man. He's always been just the most competitive person I know, super just gamey, and gets it done. And he shot this deer pretty close, and it was high. And we tracked the deer for 700, and I drew straight lines, on the map, and it said 748. But it had to have been over 800 yards. It had to have been a half mile or so. We tracked this deer. We got several times. We got to the point where we can't find any blood, and I'm up there 40 yards, and I find blood, a tiny speck of blood, and we just did that for hours and hours. It was freezing cold, and we got to the point where it was man, there's no way we're going to find this deer. We ran out of blood. We did some grid searching, and we're not able to make it happen. And I know he was pretty upset, but it wasn't terrible because he shot a lot of big deer, and he was just kind of mad at himself for not making a good shot. He said that, which you might see this as a motif in this episode, but he said that the deer looked at him when he drew, and he kind of freaked out, and he just was quick shot, and there's something about it. I was talking to our buddy Anthony, who's been on the podcast a few times. There's something about when a deer looks at you when you're drawing, you're like, I got it. I'm at the point. Everything came together. I set the stand. The wind was right. All these different factors. I got drawn. That is the biggest thing, because that means it's about to happen. And at that point, Anthony's you just want it to be over. You want it to, because it's only going to last a few seconds anyway. So you want it to be over and feel that rush of success, and you end up possibly making a bad decision or a quick decision and making a bad shot, and that's I think what he did. So Drew ended up finding his deer. He shot it while I was up there, but he didn't. Well, I guess he found it. Yeah, he didn't find it till we were gone.
Yeah, he found it while I was there.
Yeah. So that was must have been a pretty good vibe for the camp.
It was. We had fun. Drew was stoked when he found that deer, man.
And big 8, man.
He kind of downplayed the deer a little bit at first, because it wasn't like a toad or whatever. But once he found it, man, he was really excited about it.
Cool.
He should have been, man. It was a mature buck, big deer. The deer actually you were chasing for a little while, right?
Yeah, on that hunt.
And I think once he got to it, he really. I think that search kind of not that Drew was in a bad place before, but it kind of, I don't know, just changed his outlook on deer a little bit, and I think it was really cool when he found it. And dude, we took pictures of it, smiled, laughed, high-fived a bunch, and stuff whenever. And what I was kind of sad is I was whenever he found it, I was quite a ways away on a piece of public, and I was like, dude, by the time I get there, you're going to get this thing out. I can't really come help you. So he wasn't worried about it. Actually, what was crazy is that deer from the foot. Interesting enough, Drew took some really good iPhone footage of this shot.
Dude, how did he pull this off?
I don't know,
there?
but we need to get a camera in his hands next year.
Yeah.
Which I think he's already working on that. And he took a shot at this deer, really, comfortable yardage. Deer was still moving a little bit when he shot, and he ended up hitting it square liver shot. And we were all hyped when we saw the footage or whatever because it looked like a good shot. And then you sit and think about it, it's its shoulders back quite a bit when he takes a shot, and it ducks and pretty much just squares it up right in the liver. Well, that deer lived he found it 30 hours after the shot. That's when he found it. And that morning, so 24 hours after the shot, he found wet blood. So, the deer was still alive.
Bleeding.
24 hours later. So, it kind of makes me question the whole 8-hour liver shot.
Oh, I know. That's what I've told people with the Frankenstein video. We've had so many haters on there, And I'm like, dude, I have an experience prior to this that – with Justin's deer. If you go back and listen to episode 21, this is what I'm talking about. Our buddy Justin Wright, liver shot a deer. I'm pretty sure it was one lung liver. I mean, like, I don't see, he could have missed the lung. He was pretty low, but like, man, there was tons of blood. And, you go listen to the episode, but 30 hours later, we're still chasing the deer across the plains.
Yeah. It's nuts, man. And then that's going to influence some decisions later in the trip too. But yeah, Drew found that deer. We were stoked. I think that was on Thursday. And Drew's like, all right, dude, tomorrow night we're going to the restaurant and we're going to have a steak and we're going to celebrate. And I was like, all right, dude, sounds good to me. Sounds like fun. And it was really cool. Yeah, me and Drew got pretty tight on this trip, man.
Good, man.
Like it was, I was sad to see y'all go, but it was kind of a good opportunity for us to kind of, chill and have some meaningful conversation and stuff. So real cool. I appreciate that guy's friendship. But so that happened Thursday. I went to a new piece of public just because I needed a breath of fresh air pretty much, and saw quite a few deer doing some very strange things, which was cool. And I'm kind of interested to go back to that place later and maybe do some hunting more in the rut just to see what's going on over there. But
you had checked a card before you went, right? Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. I checked a card that was going to determine like whether I was going to, because my wind wasn't great for a place that I really was feeling good about. So I went and checked a different card and not a deer on the whole card. So that stunk. So that's what kind of made me say, you know what, I'm just going to take this opportunity to go over here and see what's going on in this new piece of public. And saw quite a few does and a spike. So I think that there's enough deer around in the rut. There'll be a decent buck around. Came home and, got to celebrate with Drew. And then the next morning, I went and hunted that money place and didn't see much. But I checked that card the day before and knew that, like, there was some daylight activity on a buck that's definitely a target. And particularly, I think that, like, for 4 days straight, he was there in the evening, like, at or just after shooting light. So, really good odds, right? Went and hunted that morning, didn't hardly see anything, which was depressing, except I had that good camera info that was like, okay, if they weren't here this morning, real good chance they'll be here this evening. And that morning, I forgot all of my clothes at the house, so I had to go back. So I got in there late, but I've tossed this around in my head anyways because the approach to this stand is pretty sketchy anyways. That's two anyways in the same sentence. I don't know if you heard that. But the approach to the stand is so sketch that there's a real good chance you can bump some deer in the dark right there.
I did it.
And
on that trip.
Yeah. I've thought about going to that stand late on purpose. And that way you could actually see what you're doing. Not late, but like in the daylight somewhat. But the only thing you risk is that there is a big buck underneath the stand, and then you don't have a shot. But if there's not a big buck and there's some does or something, then it would be nice to be able to let them feed through and sneak in later, So, I don't know, at least tried that out, and either way there weren't any deer there, so it didn't matter.
Yeah.
But went, had lunch, got back in there that afternoon, and sat pretty much for 2 hours and didn't see anything. But this time of year, especially up there, whenever you get to hunt bait, like you're pretty much living for the last 30 minutes, of daylight at least. In the morning, I feel like there's a chance, pretty late because it's so cold. I mean, almost every day I saw some deer moving somewhere in the 9 o'clock hour, a couple hours after daylight. So, but in the evenings, it's pretty much as the sun is setting, you're starting to see some deer. Well, that night, as the sun was setting, the grass is starting to turn purple. It's just awesome. I see around the bend in the creek, steps out a buck, and there's like pretty much no question that this deer is going to come in to like my trail right in front of my tree, right? What stinks is that deer did not come from the direction I expected him to, and about 15 minutes before he came in, the wind went to zero. So it was a Krispy Kreme up in that tree. Let me tell you, it was like so quiet. I couldn't like even move my shoulders, right? Like, Sitka has like the new Fanatic system that's like the science of sound or whatever, and We have a YouTube video on it. It's kind of cool, but first of all, we hardly ever need FNX systems where we hunt. It's cold to us, but like not like freezing cold all the time. But like their campaign was like to cut the sound that your clothing makes when you move by like 40%. And we're like, okay, whatever. That night, let me tell you what.
Would have liked to try it out.
Oh, my goodness. I would love to have tried that because, I mean, the sound of my arm raking across my chest and stuff like that deer would, like, look around.
Ugh.
It was nuts, man.
Yeah.
And what stunk even worse is that there's no movement in the trees. And the way that the topography works there, he's coming in kind of on the other creek bank. Mm-hmm. And I'm about 20 feet up high in this tree, but where he's at is probably 10 foot higher than the creek. So whenever he's like at 100 yards out there facing right at me, I'm pretty much in his line of sight. Mm-hmm. So I can't really get away with anything. I'll whip the camera around as soon as I see him. And after that, I really can't move until he goes past me, which I don't know. There's so many things that when you look back on a hunt like this that make you kind of question what you do and how you do it. Maybe I should have. My first instinct should have been to grab the bow and then get whatever footage I can. But my whole thought pattern ever since we've started filming hunts is trying to work the other direction. Mm-hmm. You know, because you know me, I'm hunter first, camera second, and like if we see a deer, I don't grab the camera, I grab my binoculars to see what it is. That's what I do.
Yeah.
But I try to, like, especially when I'm self-filming, I'm like, okay, I have to get this on footage, right? Yeah. So I get really great footage of this deer coming in all the way. His eyes are literally the size of black softballs. I mean, he's like looking bug-eyed the whole time. It's not like he's like scared, but he's very alert, you know? I think it's just because it's so quiet that everything is making a sound around him. So this deer comes in. I can't do anything except kind of just like pivot the camera arm as he comes by 12 yards from my stand. And my idea, as soon as I saw that he was like staring down the barrel at me, was I'm just going to let him walk past, and then I'm going to get my stuff done whenever he's facing away, and I'm going to shoot him 30 yards at the corn, which for me normally is a really comfortable shot. I let all that happen. He gets to about 20 yards past me, and I go to reach for my bow, and he whips his head up and looks at me. And the whole time, by the way, the whole time all this is going on when he's coming in, he looks up at me like 3 or 4 times. Mm. He knows that there's something in that tree. Right. He doesn't register it as a threat, but he knows there's something up there, being me. Like, he just doesn't realize
there's a lot of raccoons in this area,
yeah,
too.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's like, he's used to stuff being up in the tree. The woodpeckers are loud as all get out, you know?
Oh, yeah.
So, and what I was hoping for the whole time was that there would be another deer behind him to take his attention off of me, but he's by himself completely. So,
that happened last year on public in November.
Yeah, the other deer was just a little bit too far behind.
I was like, all right, if this thing will catch up, we'll be perfect. But it didn't.
Dadgummit, man. A lot of crazy stuff happens up there, man.
I know, it's fun.
So this buck looks up at me when I'm 20 yards away, or he's 20 yards away, and then puts his head back down and heads to the corn pile. And I'm thinking, okay, we're about to Tyler this deer. Like you always say, what is a better target than a deer that's happy and eating corn, right? Like, instead of like looking around, being jumpy, just let him go eat and everything will be cool. Well, I get him framed up, really tight, by the way. He's like full frame in this in this framing. So I'm trying to get my bow, and it takes me like twice because he looks up. And one time he doesn't actually look at me. I think he's just looking around. But I finally get my bow. I go to draw and like literally just put tension on the string, and he looks at me. Oh, gosh. And then I let him put his head back down, go to eating, and I get about quarter draw, and he looks at me, and I let down.
Oh, my goodness. It's terrible.
Yeah, and I think the GoPro is running through all this, but the battery ran out while stuff was happening, so I don't know how much we got of this whole scenario. And then finally he looks down and eats some more, and I like get it back probably 7/8 of the way, and he looks up, and I kind of just finish off while he's looking at me. And the thought runs through my head of I've read a lot of stuff lately about how you shouldn't shoot a deer while his head is down because they have a leverage point to drop their body more. So actually shooting a deer while their head is up is better as far as like string jump goes. makes sense. I think they're jumpy either way, right?
Yeah.
But I was like, okay, his head's up, so I'm going to go ahead and shoot him. He was looking at me, but at that point in time, he had seen me finish my draw. I don't think he was ever going to not look at me from there on out.
Right.
You know, earlier in the season, I had that curvy 9 in there, and he saw me move in the tree, and like got spooked and kind of like stomped around. And then put his head down and got another bout of corn and then left.
He's like,
He's looking
I'm
at me the whole
still
time. That's right. He's like, I'm still going to eat my corn, but I know you're up there and I'm out of here. But so I was worried that would happen with him, you know. So I draw back, and it's that same thing where the deer's looking at you, and you're like, I got to get this done. You know, who knows what's fixing to happen. So I'm pretty calm. My pulse got pretty high whenever he was real close, but once he got out there, I kind of like went into just kill mode, you know, and I was pretty calm. But I think also in that calm time there, things seem like a long period of time, and they're not. I noticed in I think your doe video or the Texas buck, I don't remember one, but like you like said that you took your time and shot, and in the footage just like dunk dunk, which yours was a great shot, right? So there's no foul there.
Well,
but
the Texas buck was at 7 yards. You know, that was pretty easy. The doe, it wouldn't have been the doe because that was a decent chunk of time after I grunt stopped her.
Yeah.
But the Kansas buck that I shot at.
That's the one I'm thinking of.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah,
I was like, I drew a pin or whatever. It doesn't even look like I had time to draw a pin.
No, I know.
You know,
and
I did. I remember it, but like you said, like, dude, time warps during that moment.
It's nuts, man. You're like, okay, I'm sitting here very calm. I've had this pin on him for at least 30 seconds, which actually it's not enough time for an acorn to hit the ground.
Point
right?
30.
Yeah.
Point 30 seconds.
So, I draw my bead up and anchor, and I mean, it's just rock solid. And I release, and he ducks, and I see where it hits, and immediately I knew that it wasn't like it was not a fist bump situation. You know, it was worrisome. Like, and I think you can even tell by my reaction. I think, like that. Just because
you do that a lot whenever, like, you remember the spike the meat buck?
Yeah.
The first spike that you shot at where you like hit a limb or something.
Oh my gosh.
You like let out a big old and I was like, I laughed because I knew that you had killed later that day. You know, when I was watching
exactly. But you start thinking about all the things I've missed. I really start to wonder about myself sometimes. But
you've had some hard shots, man.
Yeah, I also think that this really is what happens in bow hunting.
Yeah.
And I think that
30 yards too. You've shot a lot of things at around 30 yards.
Yeah.
For whitetails, that's a tough range.
It is, man.
You know, they can, especially when it's dead quiet. Like, they're gonna feel like lightning just struck, and they've got plenty of time to move. You know.
Yeah, I need to be shooting more hogs and does and stuff like that. Just more that way. Just have more of a feel for distance and stuff. Because I mean. Just to be frank, I haven't killed a ton of deer. You know, well, I probably killed 25 deer in my life, and only 6 or 7 of those have been with a bow. A bunch of them were rifle when I was younger. You know, so I haven't shot a ton of. I've killed more hogs than most people, but that's all been with a rifle, pretty much.
We figured that out on that trip too.
It wasn't really fair.
More hogs than ducks.
Yeah, that's right.
Then I've killed ducks.
That's right.
And I've killed a lot of ducks.
But I need more time with a bow. Shooting things. That's just all there is to it.
Yeah.
But long story short. Actually, that's going to be still pretty long. But back to the point is what I should say.
Yeah,
back
there you go.
to the point. I hit this deer, what would you call a marginal shot? Like, it wasn't crap, that deer's going to live. And it wasn't okay, he's going to drop. I'm going to watch him drop. I still was saying, drop, please drop, please drop. Because, so let me get back to the shot. He ducked probably 3 inches, and I aimed probably 2 or 3 inches higher than what I probably should have aimed. So I hit him pretty much questionably in the very top of the lungs. Pretty much dead zone is what you would call it, right? But it's low enough to where there's still a chance. And I got plenty of penetration. Surprisingly enough, didn't get a full pass-through. I guess I hit 2 ribs, and it's just, and up there you're hitting a lot of bone when you hit ribs because they're starting to curve up. So my fletching's buried up in him is what happened. He had a bunch of air hanging out his other side, and he spins out. I hit him like on the top quarter line, if you can imagine, where that would be. I aimed center body. I should have aimed, middle, lower third, especially since he was looking at me and he's at 30 yards. But, it was just one of those things where I settled the pin and I was like, all right, that's where it's going to go. And he spun out, ran about 40 yards, and then went and stood at like 70 yards for quite a while. And I was actually able to look at his exit wound side, and there was quite a bit of blood. So that gave me some hope. And then he starts tail flickering, and which also gives you some hope. But he's got that whippy head thing going on, like what just happened. And I can tell he's not very sick, but he also is feeling it. It's just like, I've never lost a ton of blood, but I've had some pretty good cuts. Like you get a little woozy sometimes or something, and it's probably, I don't know, I'm just assuming like whenever a deer loses a couple cups of blood, he probably doesn't feel the same. The oxygen level isn't quite what it used to be. But I continue to watch him very slowly work his way out of here for the next 10 minutes probably. And finally he crests a hill, and I think I called you at that point in time. Didn't we talk on the phone?
Yeah. I was at a gig that night.
That's right.
We were sound checking, and I got a call, and I was like, oh, that's a good call right there.
Yeah.
And so I had to take it, and you gave me the rundown. And same thing, like when you told me there was a bunch of blood on the exit side, I had a lot of hope too.
I thought the exit side was lower than it was too. I think I told you I thought the exit side was halfway down, but it wasn't. But yeah, still, I told you there's a lot of blood, which, if you got blood, you always have a chance, So I told you my plan was to get down out of the stand, go light with my bow and the camera, and just try to go get eyes on him again. There's a really tall hill that I could go get on the crest of and glass the bottom where he was. And so I did that, got down, ran up to the top of the hill in my full garb, which I was pretty hot by the time I got up there.
I bet you were.
But I got up there and started glassing, and he was nowhere near where I thought he would be. So I assumed he'd follow this drainage on up out of there, like a little secondary, creek or whatever. And he wasn't in that at all. So I'm looking around, kind of like disheartened, and I look down in the bottom, and he's like taking a like hard right turn, like past 90 degrees to go back downhill to the very bottom down by the creek. And I can see him up on this little bitty knoll right by the creek, and it's getting late. And I actually switched the camera over to night shot, because at that point in time, I'm not really documenting for all y'all to watch. I'm documenting so I can see where he's at as long as I possibly can. And he stands in the same place for like, I don't know, it might only have been like 3 or 4 minutes. It seemed forever, but time's really tough, like we talked about. Stands in the same place for a long time. And finally he crests this little knoll, and that's when I said, okay, that's 30 minutes plus after the shot, and he's gone a half a mile or more, but he's straight line half mile from the shot. There's no way that I feel good about going in here into a place that I don't know well. Like a lot of times, if there's been a place I've been to in the daylight a lot, I feel pretty good about walking around at night, even without a lamp,
You make fun of you all the time, because we will walk into stands, and we are literally, I'm like, oh, that limb hit me on the same spot last time. Like, we're walking the exact same trail in the dark.
Yeah, I got a knack for that for some reason. But this place I'd never walk through. And so I was like, there's no way with this deer in as good a shape as he is 30 minutes after the shot that I'm going to go in here at night and try to do a recovery. Because, first of all, while he's standing there on that knoll, yeah, he's really still, and I'm feeling really good about it because his tail's flickering, and then he, whips his head around. And I'm like, man, a sick deer is not going to whip their head around that fast. He's still okay at this point in time. And that really kind of, tugged at my heart a little bit, because it's coming, man. It's just, that's not a good sign. So that between those couple factors, that's when I decided, okay, I need to go back and just let him lay and come back first thing in the morning and just resume the search. Because I set a pin exactly where I saw him last. Like, I was able to do that because of some bushes and stuff. So I knew exactly where I could go and cut my blood trail down by 1,000 yards right away, right? So go home, I go back to camp, and not home, go back to camp, meet up with Drew, and we go have our steak dinner, but it was not near as celebratory as what we had originally hoped. Showed Drew the footage, and he was like super optimistic, which I think he was just being a bro, trying to lift my spirits a little bit. Drew doesn't like it when people are sad. I can guarantee you that. He's not. He's not a sad kind of guy.
Yeah.
Which I'm usually not either, unless I'm the sad guy. And you and I talked about this some. Like, I'm not a sad guy. Like, right after something happens, you and I are kind of inverse when it like. When I missed the deer in 2017 or 2018 on the, from the ground, I thought that you were going to die, like right away. And I was like, dude, he's still right there.
He said, quit crying.
And then, on the way home, I'm like staring out the window, not wanting to talk. And you're like, okay, it's all right, man, whatever. And
Get him next time.
That's kind of how it was that night. Like I wasn't down in the dumps. I was very realistic about what the chances were. I knew that it wasn't a standard fatal hit, but it definitely could have been fatal. There's some arteries and some veins and could even clip the top of the lungs. So just had a general idea of what could happen. So Drew and I went out, went home, went to sleep. I'm not a guy who really loses sleep too much. I know people talk about that. I think it's like a conversational due diligence, Like I really don't think guys on TV are losing sleep all the time when they say that, man.
I don't.
It's kind of fake.
I mean, yeah, and I feel the same way about other guys.
Yeah, but I mean,
I sleep well though.
Yeah,
most of the time.
Some people don't sleep well, and I'm not saying that everyone's that way, but I think that in general, and I'm not calling anybody in particular fake, but I think that in general, it's like the thing to say.
Oh yeah,
and I'm not going to
see what happens.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. That's right. We'll get him next year. So went home, went to bed, got up early the next morning, had to pack everything up because I was going to leave from that property. So I didn't get out there like at first light, but it was shortly after, and it was enough time to get decent light. If you get out there at gray light, you're not going to be able to see blood very well anyways. And Drew had a good point, too, that we should get out there at good light and look for coyotes because, there's a bunch of coyotes out there. And if you can spot some coyotes, maybe they'll take you to where your deer is. Well, I wish we would have been able to see some coyotes, but we didn't. So we went down and went to the place where we last found him. And right away I found 2 spots of blood, but it wasn't like a copious amount of blood. It was like one spot was a big drip, and then the other spot was like 3 big drips. And it's like, man, for a deer that stood there as long as he did, it's not good. He's probably coagulating at this point in time.
Mm-hmm.
He's not going to bleed out right there. But I still had hope because of how high he's hit. It's not like he's going to be draining, until he like lays down or something. Maybe some blood will run out, but there's a good chance that his body cavity is filling up, and he's just not dropping. So Drew and I spent about 3 hours from there gritting out probably 300 yards on a 180-degree scale, radius every direction on different trails we thought he could have taken and just different, scenarios on like what a deer would do. Didn't find any more blood. Didn't find blood on bushes, which I thought was really weird because I thought for sure some of that blood that was on his side would rake up against a bush and like just leave something there. I've seen enough Jurassic Park movies that always like there's going to be a fern with some blood on it.
Yeah.
Well, that wasn't the case. So pretty much in deep despair, I decided, I'm just going to walk the creek up and down and just look for the deer at this point in time. So I kind of found a high bank and walked up and down that bank, or walked up the bank. And about 500 yards from the last place I saw the deer, I see a tuft of hair. So, okay, that's something. I'm going to go down there and look at that. And I look at that, and can't really figure out what's going on. You know, it's just like a tuft of deer hair. It looks fresh, but hair doesn't really go away. So I don't know. And then I kind of make the next little bend, and there's a big pile of hair, but it's not enough for a whole deer. But there's a big pile of hair, so I'm just kind of putting some pieces together. And then I kind of walk up this little knoll right here. There's no rotten smell or anything, so I'm like, kind of got an idea what's happening here. Walk up this little knoll, and there's just, it looks like somebody emptied 2 trash bags of hair on top of this knoll. And I go looking around. There's no blood. There's no skin, no bones. I found a bone fragment of, I'll show it to you in a second, a bone fragment of a ball socket joint. And that's the only thing. It's about the size of a ping pong ball. That's the only piece of bone I found. And it was pretty fresh. It was still kind of wet, which pretty much leads me to believe that with what the coyotes had left was that hair and the stomach contents. Every other thing was eaten except for that. Mm-hmm. There was probably 5+ pounds of corn right there. That was, like, I smelled it. It didn't smell bad. It's very fresh. Mm-hmm. It's all still very wet, which out there, things dry out real quick, especially this time of year. Mm-hmm. There's that bone fragment, and just all that hair. And I just got to believe it was him at that point in time. I looked around some other places, could not find a bone anywhere.
No head.
Nothing, no head, nothing. Which, I'm going to be straight. Like, I'm not 100% convinced it was him, but I looked around more and couldn't find any other evidence of anything else. I walked another 200 yards up from there. No deer sign, nothing. Yeah. Like, I don't know what to say, man, but it just...
it could be coincidental. It's another deer, but...
Yeah, we're in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
And there hadn't been corn out there all year, so that whatever deer died right there had been eating that pile from that week because it was gone, right? Mm-hmm. And it was fresh. Like, I'm not a forensic expert, and I've watched a lot of CSI Miami. They never talk about deer, right? So, I don't really know what happens to a deer. But the corn was wet and not very soured. So I don't think it was in the deer's belly for long, which to me, that's within 24 hours or so of, what was laying there. So, I think 95% chance it's him, so pretty much I feel pretty good going to bed at night saying that I found what was left of my deer. And that makes the second deer that the Element Boys have lost to coyotes in Kansas.
And about a year apart.
It was really upsetting for me. That would have been the first deer I was going to be able to put in the freezer for the season, and didn't get to do that now. So now we are after Christmas, and I don't have any deer in the freezer, which I know you say you're going to give me a little bit, and I appreciate that. But, I kind of value that I can kill things that we eat.
Yeah.
Maybe I can't.
No, you can. You killed elk.
What stink? Well, not
killed
this
a meat
year.
buck last year.
That's the stinky thing, dude, is that this year I also hit an elk eye.
Yeah.
That gummit. It'd be easy to point at, different things of equipment or whatever and be like, oh, I need to change this, and this. Well, maybe I just need to not hit things high. And I'm going to have to really kind of do some soul searching about how to make that not happen. Which I know the steps in the process. I know exactly what I should have done different in this scenario. I should, if I would have just aimed lower, he would have been dead, But there's a bunch of other factors that could have changed too that also resulted in him being dead.
Yeah.
But that's the one that's completely on me right there, you know?
Is there any chance that, because I know, so I shot your bow a little bit earlier this year in October, and I struggled to have consistency with it because it's, like we kind of talked about, built like a Ferrari. Like, it's rare and ready to shoot. The grip's different than any bow I've ever shot. I'm not an expert at shooting bows anyway, but I struggled with the consistency. You were telling me that it has to do with your grip, and if your grip is not like it should be exactly, then you're going to sail it one way or the other a lot of times. And is there any chance that like in the moment that your grip isn't, like you haven't shot that bow long enough to have your grip consistent in that moment, or that you're not thinking about it or something like that?
I don't have a clue on the elk because that was a blur.
Yeah,
to be
it was
honest,
for me too.
so many things was going on. The first shot that I missed, sailed high. I know I just used the wrong pin, but the second one, I don't know. But I know on this whitetail, everything was perfect.
Yeah,
I watched my arrow through the air. I mean, the footage.
It went where you thought it was going to go.
Yes, it went exactly
Right.
where I thought it was going to
Gotcha.
go. It just wasn't low enough.
Yeah.
I can show you in the frame where I'm aiming and where it hits on the deer, and it's negligible where it went. But I think that if you get more abstract with that thought, that there is something to it. I think that, especially with my old bow, I used to shoot a Matthews Adrenaline, and that thing was just, I could shoot it upside down and hit stuff, With this bow, it is a process to make it do what it's supposed to do. And it's just like if you take a student driver and put them in a NASCAR car, like they're not going to be able to make it perform perfectly. I'm not saying I'm a student driver, but, I'm not Levi Morgan either. So it's just a really tough bow to shoot. And I think that even when I do execute it properly, it takes enough mental concentration to make that happen that sometimes it's taking away from my capabilities as of aiming and other things like that.
Well, here's another thing. Okay, so
let me say one thing.
Yeah, sure.
I'm not blaming the bow at all for this shot. It's all my fault. But when you podcast, you have to talk about things. So we're going to talk about that. All right, proceed.
Okay, well, here's what I want to talk about. There are going to be people out there that are critical. Listen to the podcast. If we decide to release this video, which we would like to hear you weigh in on it as a listener, just should we put this out? Because we've already got one that was demolished by coyotes. I was in the same situation last year where I shot a deer, liver shot, which is obviously different than your shot, but still, marginal shot. Buck gets eaten by coyotes. Most of you probably have already seen it. It's really gone viral the last couple weeks, for us at least. And a lot of people that don't like how it all turned out, including myself. But anyway, I was in the same situation where, like last year, if you hadn't shot the meat buck, I wouldn't have eaten deer meat all off season. You know what I mean? Luckily, you gave me some of that. But it's not my favorite way to display hunting. But I think it is, like you said in the very beginning of the podcast, it's kind of real life bow hunting. Your TV guys are not going to put these out there. I promise you that. Like it happens, and they haven't put it out there, and that's their prerogative. I'm not judging them in any way at all, but I think that it gives an opportunity for some guy who maybe comes across it that's 14 years old that is just now getting into bow hunting to go, you know what? I'm not the only one out there that shot a deer and didn't find it this year, or got eaten by coyotes or whatever, that makes marginal shots. I'm not the only one that does that, and I'm going to keep after it. If they don't have these videos to look at, they may go, man, I'm the only person that makes bad shots. Like I'm probably just going to play games or whatever, or get into sports or whatever, which is fine, whatever. But like, we want some deer hunters to join the ranks and be on our side, right? As far as like politics and that kind of thing goes.
Yeah, and to get out and try their absolute best, but understand, like, there's so many things in hunting that I can relate back to my spirituality. Maybe that's just because I really like hunting and I really like Jesus. So like those things, it's going to happen. But I think it's a real life lesson. Like, no matter how much you prep, no matter how hard you try, you'll never be able to achieve that perfection, So I think that in life, like, for a long time, I carried a lot of guilt about sin and like questioned my salvation and stuff because of it, and now it's not that. And I think that that's maybe why I'm like a little bit more at ease about, doing something like this, hitting a buck and not finding it. Like, I made a mistake, but I'm never going to be perfect. So we shouldn't we shouldn't hold anybody to the standards of trying to be perfect.
Right.
President Trump has said many things I don't really like. He's not perfect, but I think he's done a pretty good job, honestly.
Sure.
And you might disagree with that, and that's okay too. We can have a civil discourse about it,
Right.
But there's no one I didn't hold Obama to a perfect standard either.
Right.
Like, he did some stuff I liked, actually,
Sure.
but there's some other things he didn't.
Yeah.
So, you just shouldn't ever look to someone as your example to perfection, because there's pretty much only one ever. So if we can all just agree on that, we can just chill out with the rage
Which
a
we
little
can't.
bit. Yeah.
But there will be a lot that listen to this podcast that do, I think.
Yeah.
And so I got off on a tangent earlier, but my point that I was trying to make through the lack of perfection that you and I have displayed is that basically, if you, like I said, there will be critics, but if you have never had a deer, a big buck, walk by you at 12 yards while it's dead silent, and you're trying to get a camera on him and do a good job because you want to, for several reasons, but you want to make a good representation of hunting through your videos, right? And we don't have to do this, but we choose to. And so that's part of what we're doing. And it's not illegal, and we're doing it. So if you have never tried to do that and get it all in the frame and then make a shot and focus and everything like that, it's difficult, man. It's difficult. I can promise you it's hard. Shot 3 deer on film this year, and only one of them was actually in the frame when I shot him, you know? So it's a difficult thing to do. So if you haven't ever tried that, man, then, don't be too hard on people, man. I mean, but I think a lot of our listeners will understand, man.
Yeah.
I think they like what we're doing. Hopefully,
we appreciate y'all.
We do
for sure.
appreciate the sport.
It
big
is
time.
funny to see people on YouTube be like, "Well, that's what people who film their hunts do. They want good footage the next day."
Yeah.
Well, brother, you're the one on YouTube looking for films of hunts, so you're kind of perpetuating it. It's like,
No,
if
it's
you
true.
want filmed hunts,
I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. Like, you searched somewhere you wanted to see hunting footage.
Yeah.
So it's what it takes. Right?
Yeah.
And I say that to say, like, at no point in time did the thought of good footage cross my mind with letting him sit around. Because, I mean, let's be honest, this wasn't like the biggest buck. He was a good buck. I was stoked to shoot him, but he wasn't like a toad. And I'm by myself anyways. It's not going to be like, ready to go to the movie theater footage, I would 100% have rather me have never shot that deer than for me to have to wait till the next morning.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I did not want to have to do that.
Yeah, it's stressful. It's a lot of walking.
Yeah.
And
I might be coming off whiny. Sorry, I'm sick. But, like, I saw some guy comment that on your other video, and it's just like,
there's been
brother,
a couple of them.
you don't have a clue.
No, they don't. And the thing is that, like, the reason that we leave these deer is because in the country that we've left these deer, especially, dude, if you're out there at night with a little surefire flashlight or whatever you got, like, if that deer jumps up 150 yards away because it sees you out there messing around or whatever, or hears you splash through a creek or whatever, those deer go forever, dude.
Yeah.
They don't stop.
And
even
they're
if they're
tough,
hurt.
man.
They are, dude. Like, you won't find that deer tomorrow.
I passed a giant broadhead through this deer, right? Yeah. And he was still walking. Like, if somebody shot me with a broadhead, I wouldn't make it 2 steps because I would be crying.
Yeah.
I might live over it, but I wouldn't go anywhere.
No.
Bring the ambulance,
That's
know?
right.
So, like, Drew's deer lived over 24 hours with a fatal shot.
And that's the thing. If they bump that deer in the night and he goes a half mile into another draw, dude, you don't find the deer. No. You don't get the meat either way. You know what I mean? So, like, I have decided that I think I'm going to buy a cheap spotlight, and where legal, I'm going to, if this happens again, I'm going to use it, man. And I'm going to go out there about 11 p.m. and we're going to take spotlights and flood the area in case he does jump up.
Is that legal? Have you looked it up?
I mean, I would think if you're searching for a wounded deer and you got a flashlight, you should be okay. Yeah. So
this state's the state you can't use blood trailing dogs.
Yeah.
That. Talk about a weird thing.
Yeah, it is a weird thing, man. Especially because that's a not very highly populated state either.
I don't get it.
I don't get it, but I think that's kind of the cure to it is like, well, if we have a spotlight that's reaching out several hundred yards, then maybe we can feel pretty good about if he does jump up, keep an eye on him for a little while, see which direction he's headed or whatever. Yeah. But I mean, if you go out there with a little flashlight, dude, and you jump him in the night, dude, you're just not going to find him. So, like, that's the thing I've been trying to, like, tell people. But It is an unfortunate situation, man, and I feel bad for you. I really was wanting you on that last trip especially. I wanted you to shoot a deer more than I did.
I appreciate it. I know you were kind of working for it, and I felt kind of bad, that you were trying to like put me in the best spots and stuff, but I also appreciate that.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I've shot some, man. Like, I ain't got to shoot them all. Some guys may feel that way, and at certain points, I guess in your lifetime, you think about it differently, maybe. But I don't know. I wanted you to shoot one. I hate that you went, another year without, but in Kansas. But that just kind of proves that, like, a lot of people talk about it, but man, at least where we're hunting, it ain't just slam dunk.
No,
you know what I mean?
That's right, man. And that's the thing is that I think that's another thing that's portrayed a lot on outdoor media is like when people take a trip to another state, they go and shoot a deer.
Yeah.
And that's just not something that always happens. That was my fourth trip
this year
to Kansas.
I think so.
And made a big push, stayed 5 days, and that was on the last evening I could stay that happened.
Yeah, you had to leave that next morning. So, yeah, that's it's unfortunate, but we did learn a lot this year, or at least I feel like I have. I'm sure you do as well. And we're gonna kind of just segue this into like how we're gonna approach Kansas next year, the things that we learned. So, real quick, I want to go through some lingo with you guys, try to help you understand some of the properties that we hunt, what they look like. Maybe this can relate to you. Maybe you can learn something hopefully here. And if nothing else, it'll help us looking back on this maybe next season, early season. So the first property that we're going to talk about is one we spend a lot of time on in the whole year pretty much. And we have the last 2 years. We got permission a couple years ago. We're super stoked. This is the Friendly property. Really cool. It's not quite a full section of property, so several hundred acres, and it's kind of got a lot of diversity. We've got a couple of ag crops on there, which are wheat and corn. So they plant corn on the pivots and wheat in the corners, which is kind of a common thing to do. If nothing else, I think it helps soil erosion.
Yeah.
But
some years there's not corn, and there's more or less wheat. So it's kind of changing every year too. So that's something that we're going to have to deal with in the future.
Yeah, I think they're doing. We've only hunted it twice, but we think they're doing a crop rotation of corn every other year.
Yeah,
and then it's got a really good old shelter belt on it that has some old barns in it that they don't use a whole lot, which we did see them a couple times. Maybe use some of that stuff this year.
Them being people.
Yeah, the landowners or whatever, or farmers or whatever they are that have permission to
because the deer like somewhat use the barns too.
They do. Yeah. We've found beds right up against the barns.
Yeah,
like back laying on the barn, So
and that's a good, like, you could call it a wooded area pretty much. I mean, it's more than just a strip of timber.
Yeah, it's. What is it, 100 yards wide or so, probably?
Some places maybe more than that, But it's got a little mix of CRP in it too, or whatever. But I think,
grass.
like, my point is like it's this place has got every type of deer stuff that you want, right? So like you've got that big chunk of timber, you've got the ag, and then there's also a big chunk of CRP grass, which. Are we going to talk about this place in particular right now, like how the deer use it, or are we just describing it and we're moving on to other stuff?
We can go ahead and just go with it, yeah.
So that's the kind of the 3 different habitat types on this place, right? And
CRP is good, man.
It is.
It's good grass.
Last year I hunted it once, kind of on the edge, and I saw a ton of deer out there, but it's CRP is tough to hunt, as we've seen many different times. And this is tall CRP. There's a couple cedar bushes out in it or whatever. But there's a line of trees on one side of it, that you decided to go hang in this year, and you kind of had like a revelation.
Oh, yeah, dude. Like I learned on the last trip, which is where I spent most of my time, was kind of right in there. At least when you got there, I spent most of my time in there in that CRP. And I think like one of us needs to be hunting that CRP as much as possible next year, unless something – a big deer's on camera somewhere else or whatever. Obviously when we get to the season, we'll understand a little bit better if we need to or not. But like we need to hunt that a lot, I think.
Do you think we need bait over there?
I don't, but we could, and it might help for sure. There's just so much food there. It makes me wonder. And I learned that these deer are using these sunflowers, and who knows what. Like, I wonder if sunflowers change their position in a field every year, or if like naturally they're going to reproduce in the same area that they were the year before for the most part.
I don't know. An agronomist probably has a better idea.
For sure.
It probably has something to do with moisture content in the soil, I would imagine, because they always seem to be in the lower stuff a little bit.
Yeah. Well, they bed heavily up by the road in a big patch of sunflowers, and man, like there's no way to hunt them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean, without a rifle. Mm-hmm. And so they empty out from there into ag that's actually not part of our property. And that makes it tough, not to mention that there's no trees over there. But I think that, like, for mornings, there's a good chance. The grass is really tall, so it makes it tough to, like, bed a deer there, like, exactly. But I think there's still a chance that, like, a deer beds down and you can see his antlers in the grass through your binos that morning, and you know exactly where he's bedded, and you can just watch him, right? And so there's an opportunity to do spot and stalk, or even the decoy tactic that we tried a couple times when I had seen a big 8-point there.
That grass is pretty quiet. It's not like a bunch of grabby, loud stuff you got to rip through. Like, you can sneak through there, especially if there's a little wind.
Yeah, for sure. So I see that as like being a good option for morning hunts after you get done, if you don't shoot something, you know, because you can see a lot there. In the evenings, I don't feel super juiced up about that, but on the other end of the CRP field there's a big cottonwood, and it sits in a pretty remote spot with a lot of sunflowers around it, and I think for evenings it wouldn't be a bad spot, especially on those northeast winds that we get a lot.
More often than not, deer leaving that CRP, or let's just say bucks leaving that CRP, go by that. I mean, multiple times this season I watched a buck walk by or exit underneath that tree.
And that's a thing that I've seen consistent in a lot of places, especially open places, is landmark features that are visual like that. Like, deer are going to gravitate towards a tree in an open field. Yeah. You know, so if you're hunting an open field, you want to be in one of those landmark situations.
I wonder if it's like how far the chain of command goes down from like what they're registering to do that for. Like, the deer do that because they know that there's a chance that there's a licking branch on that tree, so they're going to go to that tree. Or they just like subconsciously walk towards that tree, and then when they get there say, right. You know, like I wish I knew like or exactly how intentional. Like whatever the reason is. Right. But I mean, you're right, they're gonna do that.
I mean, there's no cover really under a tree in an open field hardly most of the time, you know, but like for some reason it's a cover landmark visual that they see. So, but like even the smaller trees we've seen out in that CRP, like they gravitate towards those little groups of like small trees that are popping up out in it and stuff. You know, I don't know. There's definitely like also in that CRP that the sunflowers they're bedding in. There's an opportunity, I think, for like deer drives at some point there. And I thought about doing that the last day. We talked about it a little bit, but you know, like if you get desperate or if you feel like there's like when you push deer, they go to a certain part, say the landmark tree that we're talking about. Like you could have a guy sit up in that tree and or in the landmark tree, and then have somebody drive those deer and hope that they go to that landmark, which you talked about smashing down trails that are advantageous and come by the tree. Because some of those trails that come out by that tree, you know, they're 50 yards, 40, 45 yards. Like, we don't really want to take that poke if we don't have to, you know, so.
Especially with how many windy days you have up there. Yeah. I mean, on a heavy windy day, it's just going to be 30 and in, maybe 15 and in, like after my experience this season, you know, but not really the wind involved with that, but just in general archery stuff. Anyways, like with some of the types of grass, especially that are near that tree, we've seen that like if you use a trail like 3 times that you make to go to a stand, you end up with deer at the base of your tree because they like see that trail. It's a visual thing, and they'll take it. You know, so I think you go up there like early to mid-season, like as soon as the grass starts to die, and like make the first trail, you know, through that stuff, and you might have deer at 15 yards every day. Yeah, because you've gone up there, and I joked about it, but like the pranksters that make crop circles, you know, like those people, they have a tool specifically they use, and it's a 2x4 with 2 ropes on it that's like 3 foot wide, and they stomp the whole way every foot or so, and it just makes all the crop go down. You could do the same thing for deer trails up there, and that would be pretty slick, man.
It would be, man. I like that idea. Yeah, I think like that would definitely entail us getting up there earlier than we did this year, which, you know, likelihood of us drawing some pretty sick tags this year are slim. So,
Yeah, exactly.
we might be able to do that.
We knew Iowa would draw us this year away from it, and or had a good chance, And this year, I'm probably not going to draw Iowa, and I mean, there's still probably elk hunting somewhere along the way, but as far as like the ability to get there early in the season, hopefully, it'll happen and be able to get them to do some prep. And I think that's an overarching concept is just try to get to Kansas before November 8th. That would be a nice thing to do for next season.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think
man.
on that friendly property, one of the things that I really took from that place is that we need some permanent stands up there.
We talked about that, didn't we?
Possibly, there's definitely, I mentioned it in the last podcast, but there's one cedar tree that 100% needs a stand that stays there for forever.
Yeah.
Because if I'd been sitting in that tree multiple occasions, I would have been able to shoot a big buck, right? Because he came in, ate at corn, and they would have been 18 yards from the tree. You can't ask for anything better.
Do you hunt that on a south wind only?
Yeah, I think so. I think south wind or west. I think you could hunt it on a west as long as it's not a northwest. But because I hunted on a west a couple times this year, and deer, hook around the end of I watched them hook around the end of the timber, and they didn't even act like they smelled me. Up there, I think it has to do with the cold, and of course thermals too. But I feel like in cold air, scent dissipates really quickly. I don't know if that's the case or not, but it just seemed like the colder it got, the less deer smelled me. I mean, a whole bunch of times I've had does downwind of me out in that cornfield, and they get a little weird and stuff, but they wouldn't, freak out and run away.
Yeah.
And they're directly downwind. So, I don't know. One thing about that cedar tree is it's 30 yards to the very edge of the timber, which we've always set up there to take a shot at a deer cruising the edge of the timber. But I don't think I've really ever seen a deer cruise the edge of the timber except for that little 8-point that came to the base of our tree. Every other buck I've ever seen was coming through the middle of the timber.
That's another thing I thought about is we got some pretty good scrape pictures from the scrape further down the edge, and I feel like that they will come from the big cottonwood, come across and basically end up in that scrape area, and then they dip in and come down that middle lane in the shelter belt.
That's what the 9-point did.
Is it what he did?
He came.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Down,
you got video of him.
Yeah. And I don't know if he. I was peeing, and then there was a 9-point. So he might have caught a little glimpse of me or something, but he never was spooked. He just. As soon as I saw him, he veered off that trail, which also there was a trail for him to take there to go to the corn pile. So, I don't know. I think that either way, if I'd been sitting in that cedar tree in a permanent stand, I didn't have to make any noise to get in there. That's part of the thing, too, why we like to sit up on the edge of the timber is because if we're hanging hunting, you're going to make a little racket, especially walking in with a bunch of junk, hanging in a new tree, which we don't like to ever do in the morning anyways.
There it is, crispy up in there,
my
too,
goodness,
man.
yes. It's always still. Unless it's a front day, it's going to be a light and variable before daylight. As soon as the sun comes up, you're going to get some wind usually.
Yeah.
But otherwise up there, it's going to be still early in the morning. So that's kind of my takeaway from the friendly property, at least, is permanent stands are a thing, man. I think we need to have some.
For sure, yeah. That's and those tend to be pretty cheap, hopefully.
Yeah,
so
hopefully.
We've got several videos actually in the Kansas Rut series that have released that are from that property. So check it out.
Some big bucks.
Oh yeah, dude. KC. 2 encounters, man, with a giant 8, one of the biggest 8s I've ever seen, and one of the biggest 9s I've ever seen.
That 9 is way bigger than I remember him being.
Was like, when you did your post interview, I was like, this guy's not as juiced as I thought he would be. I think
I did the whole I'm not going to look at his antlers that much.
You probably were looking through that camera the whole time, and
yeah.
For me, I lose a lot of the actual experience when I'm trying to get the camera focused and everything.
I got a lot of footage of that deer. There's 3 minutes of him standing there in the video, and I know there's probably 10 times that of me videoing.
I love when he's you can tell it's cold because he'll breathe, and you can see his nostril. It's like a dragon breathing, just shooting out.
He was like a dragon, man. He has some big old brow tines. Golly.
Yeah, they're nice. They add, man.
Man, what a loser I am. But, that deer was at 50 yards, and I think that's the huge mistake is that Like, we went into that with the whole concept, like, well, I don't really want to shoot a deer right over corn, but we're going to use it as a tool. Mm-hmm. Now I'm like, dude, who cares? I'm going to shoot the deer wherever I can,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, dude. I mean, especially deer like that, man.
Yeah.
Like, it's just...
Well, I just didn't think they'd walk in there and eat the corn.
Yeah.
You know?
It's crazy,
but
man.
it's low pressure for you.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I mean, and they don't eat long usually.
No.
Like the 8-point, he was only in there a few minutes, you know.
Well,
but
how weird is it that they'll come in there, eat from that pile, and then leave a whole pile of corn to go out in the field where there's also corn and walk around and eat that corn?
Yeah, yeah.
It's like...
Got nothing else to do.
I know, I guess, man. You know, and maybe it's part about staying warm, too, you know, moving around. And out also, like, that was, you know, late rut. So they were wanting to get out there and smell does, and you can't smell near as much standing still as you can moving around.
Yeah, yeah. Well... So for this property, for the friendly property, and a lot of other situations, including the front 40, you know, I have like I want to have a full body doe decoy next year.
Yeah.
And so let me explain real quick what the front 40 is. It's a you know, small permission property that KC was able to secure this year. And there was actually crops in when we first got permission, and we're like, oh man, like we had dealt with the crops in deal in Iowa, and like not had a ton of fun with it, you know. And so we kind of, he was more excited about it, way more than I was at first, and I may be more excited about it now than you are. Did you even hunt the property this year?
Never set foot on it.
And I did several times.
Quite a few times. I saw a big deer
every time I saw a big deer.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Yeah. So anyway, once the crops came out, it's not far. Like obviously, the front 40 kind of shows you that it obviously is not far from the road. To the back of this property, essentially. So once they cut the crops, there's not a whole lot of cover. But the deer, like, I mean, I never saw before sunset a deer come out. But when the sun set, you have 30 minutes to make something happen, and it's gonna it's gonna happen in the next 10 minutes or so when the sun sets. And I think there were. I mean, this is where I had my miss on the year. At this property, I ended up calling in a buck. That's going to be probably around episode 21 or so, or 22 or something like that, maybe, of the season playlist videos. You can go back and watch that. I had some pretty good pre-footage of this buck, decent, you know, stuff. Nice 10, man, like pretty heavy. Probably in that like 140s class range, comes out with does. I make calls. He never acts like he hears me. I'm just going to town on that grunt call and snort wheezing. He never acted like he heard me. Then next thing I know, he just like takes off. I'm trying to make a move because he's starting to walk towards this. There's like a couple of tree lines in this property as well. And, they're just like right in the middle of the ag fields. And so it's like milo and corn that they split kind of. It's basically just a small, like little couple foot of drainage, you know, through the middle of the field that they didn't plant. And there's cottonwoods there. And he's walking towards this cottonwood tree line, kind of basically to my east. He's going to end up in the cottonwood tree line about 80 yards to my east probably. And so I'm like, I got to get over that way so I can get a shot if he comes down this tree line, you know. And so there's grass in this tree line and makes it kind of difficult. And, to get a shot out. So you kind of got to be on the edge one side or the other to get a shot. So I go down there and I get like basically over there and I'm like, dadgummit, I don't have my rangefinder with me. I left it in my pack like 10 yards over here. So I like dip down in the drainage behind the grass, go back over there and get it real quick. And when I come back, this dude has disappeared. I mean, he was out in the middle of the field when I left and I did it pretty quick. Come back, this guy's gone, man. He went on a hop somewhere. So I'm like, man, did he see me like exiting, you know, my little hole to go back and get my rangefinder? What happened? And, you know, long story short, he ends up coming behind me. I get a shot, you know, you can see it all on video. But this particular property, I think if there's some great trees, I think, to hang tree stand in, which is another situation where we could have a permanent tree stand. I know exactly where the deer are bedding. I mean, almost exactly. And I think you could put a tree stand across from this and be, you know, I don't know, 150 yards from where they're bedding, in a tree line with a doe decoy out in front of you. And I think when that buck comes out, I mean, he may not immediately, but same situation. Like once he's been with those does all day, you know, bedded with them, then he's going to check them a little bit, eat a little bit of corn, see your doe decoy, and probably at some point before dark head over to see what's going on, especially if you're getting them some grunt calls and stuff. And I think it's a situation that's almost slam dunk, dude. If you know, if it's a shooter buck and you want to shoot it, like which I saw a few of them over there, and he's going to come over there. And I think that's something for that particular property that I really want to have happen. I'm also interested in seeing, like, before the crops are cut, if like those inside edges on those cottonwoods are getting a lot of scrape action in like October and stuff, you know.
I think for sure that could be a thing. I mean, you know, you mentioned how the crops are a bad thing in Iowa, but I mean, I feel like if you're there when the heart of the rut is happening, this deer are moving around those crops a lot. You know, we set up a couple times for deer to be scent checking the downwind side of crops, and it never really happened. Well, you know, if you're there 2 weeks later, it definitely could be happening.
Oh, I bet it would. Yeah.
Yeah. And
for sure.
Something that just kind of came to mind in general is that we're talking a lot about a permission stuff up here, because on a lot of the public, you really can't do a whole lot, like, change-wise. You know what I mean? So yeah, this is going to be pretty permissions-heavy, our conversation. One thing that I kind of would like to throw in here is we're talking about permanent stands. Up there, you're allowed to put a permanent stand on public, but it has to be removed, I think, 72 hours after season or something like that. Is that right?
It's not long after season.
Yeah, but you can leave it hanging all year.
Yeah.
And we ran into an issue with that on a public place, a stand that we had hunted a couple times.
Yeah.
I mean, throughout the years, right?
Yeah.
And some guy hung a stand in that tree.
Exact same spot.
Exact same spot.
Same
like,
height.
Might have creeped her videos, same spot. You
Yeah.
know? So I went in one morning and hung a stand right next to it, a hanging hunt style, because I was like, well, I don't really trust him either with his stand hanging abilities in the dark. So did that, and then you ended up going back and just hunting in that stand because it's open.
This is the same night that this buck, I shot at
that's
the buck.
right. And you get kicked out of it because this old boy comes in and says,
at like 4:30, dude.
That's my stand.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking, if he has to pull his, can we get up there on opening day of that season and hang our stand? And that, I mean, if somebody's going to claim it, I hate this idea.
Right.
But if somebody's going to claim the spot and then try to kick you out of it, then the way to kill the deer is to get in there and claim the spot before he gets to claim it.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Well, at what point, like, where's the line? You know, like, at what point does, if I'm hanging in my stand right next to him, does that keep him from hunting that stand literally 2 feet from me?
I mean, anybody who has any self-respect at all wouldn't jump up in there with you.
Yeah.
You know, but I thought about it when I hung it because
the dude came in.
I didn't use my own steps. I crawled up his steps.
Yeah.
So, like, if he wanted to be a jerk,
yeah,
he could pull the steps out from underneath me while I'm sitting in the stand spitting on him, you know, or whatever.
Yeah.
And
he was a nice guy.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
But he could. I mean, if he wasn't, he could. And it's just weird to me. Like, technically, he can sit there, right? Just like I can sit in his stand too. The weird thing is, he walked in and could see me for probably. If he knew where his stand was and was paying attention from 300 yards.
Yeah.
And so, like, he just kept coming.
Yeah.
So how did he know I wasn't sitting in my stand right next to his?
Sure.
So it's kind of a weird deal. He seemed, and maybe he's a listener, so I don't want to be mean or anything at all. I'm not trying to be, but he seemed a little bit novice.
If you weren't a listener, we would be real mean if you were not a listener.
He may have been a little bit novice.
Yeah.
He seemed a little bit maybe. So
he hung in a good spot.
Yeah, he did. I mean,
he might have killed a deer this year there.
He might have. I saw him hunting a bunch in there.
So one thing about that is that a lot of people, now that public land is like the in thing,
trendy.
a lot of people like say I really like the challenge of hunting deer that everybody else can, and listen, I don't enjoy that at all. I love getting a permission place that it's just us on there. And in fact, when I see someone else hunting a place like a public place, I try to not go hunt that place.
Yeah.
You know, like I only hung in Johnson twice.
Well, one of those later in the year it got.
Oh, yeah, no way. So the reason I like to hunt public land has nothing to do with that competition side of it. The reason I like to hunt public land is because I don't have a lot of private land to hunt, and it's another option that is really great. And a lot of times there's great habitat on the public land.
Yeah.
But
people are hunting those deer on private too, though.
Oh, sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, like, I think that's something people forget is that, like, deer outside of high fence areas, like, they're moving across properties.
Oh, yeah. They're getting hunted. They're not, they don't have zero pressure, right? But I'm just saying it's nice to have a permission place that you're the only couple guys out there. But I guess my point is, like, before people are like, well, that's just public land for you. It's like, well, that doesn't mean we have to enjoy that aspect of it. You know what I mean? Like, it's not fun to have somebody else hunting the same place as you. It's not a fun thing for me.
Yeah, no, it's not me either.
When somebody says bless you when you sneeze in the morning, it's not good.
No kidding.
Yeah.
That's, and you're talking about the Johnson farm, and we'll move on to that here in just a second. But real quick, I wanted to make one more last point on the front 40 is that where those deer are bedding, I would really like to get permission to shed hunt that this year if we can.
Yeah, but we can make it happen.
You know, it's on an adjacent property, and I think that if we could, man, we could really put some pieces of puzzle together to make something happen next year. And I feel like that would happen this year, but like I feel like next year if we can. If we do things right, like we could be done hunting in early November, pretty, up there. Like we learned so much, in other words.
Yeah.
But anyway, on to the Johnson property. This is a public property that Casey just mentioned. It's pretty open. There are some trees. We hang in one of the kind of landmark trees, and there's a lot of CRP. The CRP is really great, really high. Deer like to move through there pretty freely overall, and it's even with pressure, I think it's got pretty good potential on any November day. You know what I mean?
It's a funnel. It's always going to be a funnel. Like the reason that people hang tree stands and funnels on public land and they're easy to spot is because there's still deer that go through there, and that's what this is.
Yeah. I think for me there, I would like to kind of explore that east side a little bit on certain winds, especially like a southwest or something like that. Because if the crops come out on the border there, it is even more of a funnel. You know what I mean? Down there on that area, and you can, I think, get between deer. Moving, in certain directions in that area. I don't know if like you can get in between them and feel good about sitting there all morning, but it'd be more like I see one coming from a few hundred yards across this open stuff. I'm going to go down there and get in front of it. Like, I don't know if you want to sit there and let does just walk around you and smell you all morning and stuff. You'd want to kind of like see them and then go to them possibly, or call them or whatever.
Might be another place for your doe decoy.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
If you're hanging in one landmark tree and you see bucks that you'd have to make a move on and get seen, or you could just, go, meh, and then that deer looks over and sees a deer standing over there and comes to it. Like that would be, ideal.
Yeah.
As opposed to having to get down, move around, get crappy footage and crappy shots.
Yeah.
That's the thing I've noticed about being on the ground, man, is that anytime you're on the ground, range is usually kind of fuzzy. You know what I mean? Like, even when you do get a bounce, you're like, was that off the grass in front of him or was that off of him? You know, so that gets pretty tough. And, I mean, in your instance, and then in a couple instances of mine in the past, a lot of times you're not getting to even get a range and you're having to go old school archery, which is okay. I mean, it's the way people did it for forever. It's the way a lot of guys still do, especially with traditional equipment. But, anything you can do to make yourself a little more lethal, it feels good to do it. So,
man, people talk about ethics and stuff when it comes to that, and like, I just look at it like, I just cannot see, and obviously we're in a different age, so we don't necessarily have to hunt to eat, but I like to hunt to eat. You know what I mean? Like, I like to provide food that I know where it came from. I mean, all these things you've heard, whatever. I like to hunt to eat. And I just have to think the Indians weren't going, man, he's at 47. I'm not gonna shoot that.
Oh,
you know what I mean? Like, them dudes were trying to get arrows and animals.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. If they felt like their arrow could hit that animal and kill it, I bet they were pulling the
and they didn't have
back.
property lines either. So, they're like, if he runs 3 miles, that's okay. We'll get him.
Exactly. Yeah. Anyway, there's a property that's adjacent to this Johnson public piece that, man, I think it would be awesome if we could get permission. And this is one that may or may not happen, but we've called it the pickle property. And it's like, after seeing this year what I saw from Johnson that happened on this property and just driving around that area, I think that, like, basically this property is almost, it's got a similar tree line as to the Johnson, but then tons of CRP, and it's actually, all of it is more towards the road than this public piece, and the grass is even shorter, but it's still good enough, and it also has got a hill, but there's something about it where these deer are, like, they're betting on it, and I don't know if it's like a deal where we've seen before in that area where, like, a buck will take some does to that property, knowing that it doesn't get used a ton or not. But we did see quite a bit of deer bedding on this property this year and using it pretty freely, probably in open sight of the road at times even. And I just look at it like this could be a good property to kind of what you say, connect the dots or fill in the map. You know, you've kind of come up with this theory that like I think is pretty genius, but like even if the property seems kind of marginal or just not that great, kind of subpar or whatever, to be able to have permission on that property is a pretty good thing. And so like the more properties you can put together in a certain area, the better. And we like to also like in regards to public, if we can get properties that we can get permission on that are adjacent to public, then when we go hunt that public, we don't have to stop hunting that deer when he crosses the fence. You know what I mean? And that's a cool thing. It's a hard thing to get sometimes, but because you're talking about a very specific piece of property, you know?
Yeah.
But if you can, man, it's just more fun because if you can put together, instead of hunting 160 acres, if you can put together, 320 or 640 or whatever like that, like you're really starting to be able to chase these deer around and have fun doing it, you know? So anyway, that's a property I would like to possibly get permission on. I think
it also
would help us.
can get depressing when you realize how much ground these deer are covering like on a daily basis too. Because you're like, oh, I saw him a mile away yesterday and he's over here now. So patterning is really tough.
It is,
but
man.
What's good is if you're in a target, you could say target rich environment, a place that has more than one shooter buck, even if you don't want to be a guy who's like, I'm after, the Big Ten, but if you're like, I'm after a big mature buck, if you got a pretty good chance.
Yeah.
Whenever you're hunting a place like that and trying to fill in the dots. So,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I think that's another place that like the heads up could work really well. Just like, for instance, I saw deer bed on it this year, and I was seeing them from public, and dude, I mean, I could throw a dot down on them pretty much, know just about exactly where they are, or just walk straight to them if I had permission, and pull the heads up and do a snort wheeze or something,
Yeah.
So, but while we're on the public thing, I guess the next thing we can kind of go to is the plum thicket.
Yeah.
And you probably we spent both some time over there. We almost killed the first day over there.
Yeah, I feel like I didn't emphasize that property a lot this year. We spent some time there, but 2 of the mornings I spent there were in the truck kind of just doinking around, one day because it was terrible weather and the other day because I had to teach class. Actually 3 mornings in the truck. Because one morning we were getting out and there was deer around us, so we got back in the truck.
yeah.
But
I don't feel like it was time wasted though.
No, it actually is a pretty effective way. Like,
we're sitting on the best vantage point that there is, pretty much.
I don't think
on that
a lot
property.
of deer get past you.
No.
That way. And I mean, we kind of had 2 opportunities at a giant buck.
Yeah.
So it worked. Maybe there's another way to hunt it. I don't know.
It's tough property.
Yeah, it's a tough property to hunt because it's got a lot of topography and not a lot of trees. So I don't know. It's just, I think that I'll probably treat that place the exact same way for the rest of my time hunting in Kansas, where it's like there's going to be deer on it. If you get a favorable wind, it's a good place to go try and hunt and make a move on a deer.
Yeah.
But I think whenever you go over there, you need to realize that your odds overall are just a little bit lower than they are in other places you go to.
Yeah.
You might get in there and mix it up with some giant bucks.
Yeah, there's some big ones we've seen.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is.
And maybe one of these days we'll get better at it.
Yeah.
As of right now, I don't think we're very good at it. But, I mean, I don't know. We got within 90 yards of a giant buck without him knowing we were there. So, I don't know.
Wide open.
Yeah.
It's wide open. It's really rolling like, just plains basically. So it makes it difficult to get the right vantage point that you can see into a property. You know what I mean? So that's what's tough about it.
I mean, do you think we need to do anything different there?
No, not necessarily. I think that next year it might be a good place to be though.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there could be some. It depends on the crop rotation and that kind of thing.
I'll tell you, just overall in Kansas, there's hardly ever a place that we hunt and then we're like, we probably don't need to go back there this year.
Yeah.
There's
We usually can tell from the road if we don't need to be there. You know?
And I think that tricks us sometimes, to tell you the truth of the matter. I mean, I think we drive by deer a lot, but sometimes it's more of a like that place teeters on the edge of there might be deer there, but they're pretty much unkillable. Like there's a lot of these places that there's deer there that it's just not worth the time spent when you could be, in a wood lot over a corn pile on a permission place or something like that. Our whole concept is to go up there and be as effective as we can at killing deer. So maybe one of these days after I've killed 38 of them, I'll be like, I'm going to go take on the challenge of that big grass field, or whatever.
Let's see if I can get some guys to hunt with me.
Exactly. In fact, let me post these GPS coordinates.
So the money property, you spent the most time on it. You've looked at it on the map the most. I don't really have a huge grasp on it, but explain it to the listener what it is, and then talk about what you kind of want to do there next year.
It is a big piece of property, a very big piece of property, and it's kind of in two sections. You can say 2/3 are on one side of the road and 1/3 is on the other side of the road.
Permission piece.
Permission piece. And we've only hunted the 2/3 side. And we really have only hunted one spot of the 2/3 side. Now, this is one of those deals where it's kind of, the hills of Kansas to where it might be really big, but he doesn't hunt really big. You run the risk of if you put a corn pile within a mile of another corn pile, you might be dividing your deer up, right? And so I think that I've already done a little bit of this postseason, but I think that this year we were in one of the most strategic places that you found on the map, which kudos to you.
Thanks.
One of the most strategic places on the property to killing deer. However, it's only good on about 1/4 of the winds that are out there. So it just so happens that those are the most common winds, but on the super still days or days that's not like a cold front day, it gets pretty tough. So you have to go somewhere else, and that cost me deer this year. So I think that one of the big things about the money property is figuring out a place to go and hunt on a different wind and possibly hunt different deer on that different wind. I think it could be done on the 1/3 side in two places. And I also think that on the money property, ground blinds could work really, really, really well. I've never been a ground blind guy, but like brushing in a pop-up at the money property near a corn pile could be just absolutely money, as in the money property, right? Like, because there's a lot of places where you have a big bend or where two, drainages come together where there's no trees that are suitable for hanging a stand in, at least, but they might still be a place that you can access pretty well and a place that deer are going to use. So the only logical way of doing that is setting up a ground blind, but that's going to take some preseason work and probably a little bit more communication with the landowner and making sure that's okay.
Yeah,
I think that's also another big thing on the money property. Are you ready to move on to that? No, not ready to move on to that.
Go wherever you want to go.
So that's more than one of the like social aspects of this deal. Where when you're getting permission places, especially on a big property, like it's really. Like stomach churning almost because you just are always like, is this real? Am I going to be able to stay here? Which we love this landowner. They're great. Very nice, very great to talk to. One of those people that you don't mind keeping up with, on a monthly basis or whatever. But at the same time, being able to establish yourself as a permanent fixture on that property is going to be maybe a decade-long process, right? So that's something that we really have to probably work on in the off-season, making sure it's okay to, I guess, kind of put that foothold in as like, hey, can I put a semi-permanent stand in this place? You know? And then also you always have to make sure that whatever you're doing is in accordance with the cattle guy on the property. Luckily for us on that place, at least it's the landowner's cows. That way, you're not trying to deal with multiple entities on a property. I feel like, at least you're not trying to figure out whose opinions are different because a lot of times them cattlemen will just say no because they don't want to deal with you, and it's pretty frustrating, But I think over there that those are some of the big keys. Now, what as far as you were more of an observer, you hunted it a little bit, but you have more experience with properties like this in the past. What else do you see?
I mean, I think we need to. There needs to be at least 2, like you said, corn piles or corn feeders or whatever we're going to put out.
Okay, should we put a feeder there? Should we try to work towards that? Because
I mean,
you've made that work in the past.
Yeah.
Is it as an effective tool, or do you use feeders solely that way you can keep corn out for a longer period of time?
Yeah, that's kind of it. And I mean, you could get out cheaper, which to me, when you've got a kind of an investment going on, you're looking to kill a big deer, like, a couple $100 for most guys is not a big deal when you have a chance to maybe kill a really big deer,
Mm-hmm.
So, but I think that the feeder thing is just to have deer going on or corn going off for a longer period of time up there. But at the same time, it's more obtrusive. You're going to have, if you got cattle, you're going to have to, block it off, keep them out. And then not to mention, like, is the cattle guy going to be like, oh, they're putting stuff all over your property, or, are you going to have to okay that with the landowner or whatever? So, anyway, that's kind of the thought there. And speaking of that, I don't know if you're ready to move on to a different property now, but the space property, I'm thinking about putting maybe a feeder on that one or something. You know, like I feel like that basically these deer are moving off of kind of open prairie onto ag field at night, and I think this is where I killed Frankenstein. And I did it without corn or anything, but man, I don't want to shoot a 40-yard shot if I don't have to. You know? So, I think having something that would be staging, which could be a feeder. I mean, you could put a corn pile there and it would do well, but you got cattle to deal with, and then you've also got so you're gonna have to block it off anyway, one way or another, block the cattle from it. So, having a feeder is probably more, they're probably not just going to, like, the corn pile's not going to make a difference because they're going to eat in this ag field all night anyway. So, like, they're not just going to fill up as this is the food source. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I don't know. That's just my thoughts there.
You also share that place with some other people, too.
Yeah, that's the thing is also, you got to, like, that's some social stuff that you got to work through, and like, I don't know. It's just it's a tough thing to kind of figure out, I guess. You're always looking to try to maximize your hunting opportunity, but when it comes to properties that you're sharing and stuff like that, sometimes you gotta give some when you take,
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's right.
anyway, that's kind of like probably the majority. We have the OG property or whatever, and that's something I didn't spend a whole lot of time on this year, but I did chase that deer that Drew shot, and I like that spot. I would like to have a camera there, I actually found a camera from 2016 there when I hunted this year. I got to look at their old pictures, found probably the last pictures of hog body on our property. Yeah, so pretty cool stuff.
Yeah,
but
that is cool, man.
that kind of...
That's kind of your bonus property. Like, if there's a 170, you're gonna go hunting for sure.
Yeah. That's like if there's a big deer on that property that's old, I'm gonna be after him. But like other than that,
can I tell you my big takeaway?
What's that
from Kansas this year? A big takeaway is that I was saying earlier, Drew and I got to kind of hang out together and spend some time. As far as hunting goes, I want to tag out earlier. That way I can go shoot some birds, man.
I know it, dude.
It was so much. Then that hour was like almost the funnest hour that I've spent in Kansas.
Yeah. Well,
it's so if you and I can shoot deer in November and be able to just go up and do some bird hunting in December, that would be okay with me. I'm
hoping that we can, man. I kind of am hoping that like shed season fills the knowledge gaps in for us. And we probably will, like, explore the goals, I guess, going forward in 2020 for this soon on the podcast here. But we'd definitely like to hear what you guys have as far as like goals go. And if you have any questions in regards to how to fulfill them, we can try.
Yeah.
To help do that. So just send them on social media or whatever. Send us a message, or you can send them through the elementwild.com, which is our website. We have an email form there. Also, if there's anybody you'd like to hear in 2020 on our podcast, and you'd like to hear us just rage them with questions, just let us know. Send it to us.
Yeah.
There was a permission we gained last year we're super excited about. Big property, and I think it's pretty good. Is that something that we should try to follow up on now, if you're following me, or is that something that we really don't worry about? We gained it late in the year, spent time with the landowner at his house, quite a bit of time. Is that something we should follow up on? Because we didn't follow up this year, really.
Yeah. Are you asking me? Or you're asking the listener?
You.
Oh, I thought you were asking the listener.
No, I'm asking you.
Possibly.
Yeah.
It's far from our core.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's a long ways.
That's the tough part. Not that we're not afraid to do some traveling, but maybe we should at least. And maybe that's the progression. Like last year, we obtained a shed hunting permission. So maybe this year we ask if we can do it again. And he says, yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
You guys were great last year. And we stopped by again and we talked and we're like, hey, what about this? In April, the turkeys go to gobbling.
Right.
And just kind of, and I think that you just do the long-term slow roll on it. I think it's probably the best thing, and just kind of feel him out and go from there. So I don't know. That's kind of
speaking of long ways, you hunted the senior area this year.
Uh-huh.
Is that something that you feel like you'll be doing in next year? Basically?
I don't know if I'm going to sacrifice. I don't know if I'm going to leave fish to find fish.
Right.
But I really enjoyed the way I did it this year, where the wind wasn't great, and I was like, why not? Because it's not really that far of a drive, much further than some of the other stuff we do. It's just a different direction. So why not, right?
Yep.
So that's probably how I'll treat it in the future.
Gotcha. Well, I guess that kind of wraps up for me. You got any other thoughts or anything?
Just in general, kind of loop back to what we talked about at the beginning of the podcast, guys. I'm sorry that I shot a deer and didn't recover him all the way. So, I'm going to try to not hold too much guilt about it, but at the same time, it does not feel good. So I'm sorry for letting anybody down, but it's the way it is. Don't hold me to a perfect standard, because I will never be that. I can promise you that. If you think I should have done anything different, please let me know. Come to me in kindness. I'd appreciate that. But tell me your thoughts, your experiences, and also I guess just let us know if we should put that out there for the public. It's kind of really a hard question. Like, I would like to, I really would, but at the same time, some of the less enjoyable people in media have said, you're just giving fuel to the antis and this and that. Well, I feel like they kind of run on nuclear power and they don't need much fuel to go a long way. So I don't know, but I guess that's kind of my take. Sorry. And just kind of let me know your opinions on that deal.
Well, man, it's been a fun season. I can guarantee you that. We've had a lot of good memories. We've got tons of videos still coming out.
And we're still going to try to kill some deer. We're not done.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And actually, speaking of not being done, I did a duck hunt recently, and I actually got to be in front of the camera on this thing. And so that is going live. It's probably going to be live when you listen to this podcast.
All right.
So
that's fun. I can watch that too.
Anyway, it's fun. It's different than the last one we did last year, where it's a little more like just you feel like you're sitting in the woods with us. You know what I mean?
Nice.
It's not like music and stuff like that. It's which we get raged about too. So.
Oh yeah. Sorry to y'all who felt left out whenever we were looking at trail camera pictures. We just couldn't show you all of our intimate pictures that we had of those big deer. So.
That's right. So anyway, God bless you guys in 2020, and remember, this is your element.
Live in it.
The new Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook Wild Game Recipes for the Grill, Smoker, Campfire, and Camp Stove is out on April 24th and is available for pre-order now. Here is your book for everything that's best cooked or eaten outside, From grilling to open fire cooking to Dutch ovens to smokers to barbecue to backpacking meals to how to pull off the perfect fish fry, with pit stops along the way for lessons about Ice Age cooking methods and the best 5 ways to construct a cooking fire you can be proud of. And of course, we're focusing on wild game and fish here with over 100 recipes, including stuffed venison burgers 3 ways, wild duck with ahi verde sauce, a jerky made with cola, a gin and tonic made with fire-charred lemons, and grilled frog legs made with a sticky sweet sauce. This ain't your normal cookbook, so be prepared to be surprised. Pre-order your copy now. For more info, visit themeateater.com.